We can't just make it all about being against Trump, right? And say that, we're just here to be a opposition to Trump. That's not good enough, and that's not what working people are looking for. They expect us also to I think, clean up our act, to clean up the corruption that's in our party as well, the overwhelming influence of big money, the stock trading we see members of Congress doing, the idea that, as you said, we can't get young people involved, and that we, sometimes have, are not refreshing our ranks, right, and giving new hope and new ideas to the party. There's a lot that we need to do, and also to not be so tied up with what's going on, in like the elite circles, of the New York Times and, the podcasts, elite circles, right? Like working folks don't care about that, right? And their experience is different from what the macroeconomics is saying, right? You can't tell them the economy is the best in the world. It might be in terms of the macroeconomics, but it isn't for them.
Welcome back to At Our Table. I'm your host, Jaime Harrison. Before we begin, I want to be transparent with you. My guest today and I are friends. I campaigned alongside Colin Allred during his 2024 Senate race. And in 2025, I also worked with him as he began preparing for what could have been another Senate run in 2026. So I didn't watch this journey from a distance. I saw it up close. Colin's story doesn't begin in Washington. It begins in Dallas. Raised by a single mother, shaped by faith, discipline, and service, then on to the NFL, the Civil Rights Division of the Justice Department, and eventually the United States Congress. In the House of Representatives, he earned a reputation as a serious legislator, focused on results, not noise, before stepping onto one of the biggest political stages in the country with his 2024 Senate run. Going into 2025, Colin was again preparing for the Senate race in 2026. Then the landscape shifted. When Jasmine Crockett announced her candidacy, Colin made a consequential decision. He suspended his Senate campaign and he chose to instead run for the House. Because of Republican-led redistricting, that didn't mean returning to his old seat. He's now running in a new congressional district, facing a competitive primary against Julie Johnson, who succeeded him after he left Congress to run statewide. Folks, that's not a small pivot. This isn't a campaign commercial, it isn't spin, and it isn't a postmortem. This is an honest conversation about lessons learned, choices made, and what comes next when the work still calls. Colin Allred, my friend, my brother, welcome to At Our Table.
Thank you, Jaime. I appreciate you.
Oh, man, I appreciate you and the heart and the soul and everything that you put into being a leader, because right now, this world needs more Colin Allreds than I can ever remember. We need people.
More Jaime Harrisons, too. Right back at you, brother.
Oh, I appreciate that, man. I appreciate that. Listen, let's start off by just talking about your journey, how you got to this point. But let's talk about you growing up in Dallas. We share something in common. I think this is part of the bond that we have is we were both raised by single mothers. Talk a little bit about growing up in Dallas with your mom and what that meant for you.
Yeah. Well, listen, I think this, when you're raised by a single mother, you need a lot of help, know, and I really have honestly always felt very fortunate to have had incredible people around me, coaches and teachers, my uncle, my aunt, people who had other things going on in their lives, but decided to pour themselves into me and to do what they could to give me a chance. And I think that's what's driven my desire to try and serve and to try and give back, is the understanding that there but for the grace of God go I, that I could have very easily been another statistic, that I had some lucky breaks along the way that allowed me to do those things that you mentioned, right? And I think my mom is somebody who is like a lot of the people that I I'm trying to make sure that we're better serving now. She was somebody who was working hard, playing by the rules, but felt like she was treading water all the time. Like she was just She would teach during the day, and she would tutor at night, and then she'd have me, and then in the evening, and then repeat everything the next day. And could never put away enough money to buy a house. She rented the same house for 20 years in Dallas. That wasn't until I was in the NFL that I had the ability to help her buy that house by helping her with the down payment. She could afford the mortgage; she just could not afford to put together the money for a down payment. And she taught me the value of hard work, but also I think to understand and never forget where you came from. I think I've kept that.
Yeah. And, when you're in school, and listen, you ended up going to the NFL, but you're also a lawyer. So it means that not only you must have been pretty good at academics and also pretty good at sports also. Talk a little bit about growing up and juggling the two.
Yeah, my mom was a teacher for 27 years in Texas, and my aunt, her sister, was a teacher in the same area. And so, if you think, when I came home, they wanted to hear about how football practice went, like, no, they just want to know how the tests go, get your homework done, And I mean, I think quite honestly, they saw my sports as kind of like, okay, that's nice,
Yeah.
but we know what you really got to do, right? Since I got a scholarship to play football at Baylor, the whole time there, I was not planning on going to the NFL.
Yeah,
I was just ready
that
to
was
go.
my question. Did you always
Yeah.
know that you wanted to be a professional football player, or you play baseball also, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. Baseball was my mom's favorite sport. That was my favorite sport.
Yeah.
But football was, I guess, what I was built for. And I mean, I come from very practical people, so planning on going to a professional sport was just not a very practical thing. And I think this, Jamie. But when you grow up, like we did, and you are doing good in school, people tell you to be a doctor or a lawyer.
A lawyer.
Right?
That's exactly right.
Yeah, that's what it is. Get a profession, right?
Yep.
Get a skill. And so I tried to be a doctor my first couple of years at Baylor. I hated it. I was biology pre-med major, and I was doing okay. But then I was like, let me just try this lawyer thing. So I switched to history because my mom had been a history teacher, and I really liked that. And so I was all ready to go to law school. And these agents started calling me saying they wanted to represent me in the NFL. And I literally didn't believe them. I was pretty rude to several of them. Was like, you got the wrong guy, leave me alone, And then finally one of them sent me my pre-draft report, which said that I was a likely 5th to 7th round pick and had a chance to play in the NFL. And that's when I was like, okay, I'll give it a shot. But even then I had law school in the back of my mind. And so, it's just I think just when you grow up like we did, you don't plan on being an NFL player, but since I got the chance, okay, I'll take it.
Yeah. And so the NFL wasn't just like you start playing. Tell us a little bit about that, because that was a little roller coaster for you as well, right?
Yeah, apparently I do everything the hard way. So, I don't know what it is, man. But, they said that I might be drafted, but then I wasn't. But I was what they call a priority free agent, which means when the draft is over, a lot of teams call you and they want to sign you. And the Cowboys had called, and I talked to their linebacker coach the week before the draft. He'd had me in for a workout, and they said they were either draft me or sign me. They called to sign me. I agreed to the contract, and then Jerry Jones pulled the deal, and I was kind of left looking for what my second option was, because other teams had moved on by that point, and the only team that was left really was the Tennessee Titans. And so I went to training camp, went through off season and training camp, and I got cut. And I came home and was getting ready to go to law school. And then they fired their GM, the guy who had cut me, and they re-signed me the next day. And then I was there, for the next 4 years. And so I had to get cut, come back. But when I was at home, I was all ready to go to law school again. I just had to wait until the school year started for the next year, and so it just, fate and what God's plan was.
What did your mom and your aunt, because I know your aunt plays a really important role in your life as well. What did your mom and aunt say in the, I'm in a NFL, but I'm about to go back to law school, but I'm about to go back into the NFL again. Like, what were the family conversations about that? Because I'm sure that was pretty chaotic.
Well, they thought I was crazy, Jamie. Boy, when I went back that second time, they were like, they're like, don't call us for help. We've already told you what we think. You know what I mean? Like, this is your decision. You can waste another year of your life. You know, and they were right. I mean, it was a huge risk because doing that again would mean that I'd have another year where I wouldn't be able to go to law school. So I
Yeah.
had to wait. That'd be then 3 years removed from college before I went to law school. And if I didn't make it, and they decided to keep me around. And I think the one thing I was able to repay my mom with was that was when since I made the team, I was able to then help her with buying her house, and then I promised them that I was going to use my earnings to pay for my law school, and that don't worry, I'm still going to law school. Like I'm not going to give up on that, and that's what I ended up doing.
Man, Colin, the more I hear your story, there's so many similarities between us because in the end of the day, similar to you, I didn't go to law school directly. I stopped, worked at a nonprofit for a few years, and I had to promise my mom and my grandma that I was going to law school because they were mad, man. I
Mm-hmm.
gave up a seat at Vandy,
Mm-hmm.
and with scholarship money, they were mad.
Oh
Uh,
yeah.
and
Uh-huh.
and and then I eventually went, and the year that I graduated from law school, I came back home and I helped I bought a house for my grandparents.
Oh wow. Yeah.
And I'm sure you felt this, but it was one of the most, when I think back on my life, that was probably one of the most meaningful things that I've ever done, because just the
Yeah. Yeah.
joy
Of
that I
course.
saw on the face of my grandparents was just, I mean, it was just unbelievable. And shortly after my grandfather passed away, but for me,
Uh,
it was really a real moment. And I'm sure you felt that way about your mom because your mom probably made so many sacrifices.
yep.
Just you can't even fathom how much she sacrificed to make sure that you were prepared for all the things that you've done in your life.
No, thank you for sharing that, Jamie. I didn't know that you had done that, brother. And um, when I was covering kicks, I would sit there before the kickoff and I think, I'm about to buy my mom this
There
house.
you go.
Okay. Like I'm gonna make this tackle, and if you like, don't get in my way, right? Because like it's not gonna go well for you. You know what I mean? Like don't. I'm trying to put food on the table, brother. You better get out of the
Yeah,
way. And so that's, I think sometimes that drives you, and
yeah.
and I certainly, the funny thing is I know I was a better law student too, and I'm sure you felt the
Yep.
same way. 'Cause, I went to UC Berkeley, but I went there 5 years after I'd finished school, and I'd had all these life experiences, and I had a much clearer picture, of what I wanted to do, of what the world was like, and I think I got a lot more out of it. So the whole thing, worked out really.
So you leave the NFL, and then you eventually go to law school. You go to the Justice Department under President Obama, and then when did you decide? You know what? I'm going to run for Congress.
Yeah. So I got hurt.
Yeah.
That's how I left the NFL. As you know, I have a plate and two screws in my neck, and so I had a neck injury against the Cowboys in Dallas with my family there,
Oh
which is
wow, that's hard.
it was very circular, very
Yeah, very
circular.
circular.
It ended up where it all began. You know what I
Yep.
mean? Um, and I was lying on the turf thinking, I'm so ready to go to law school, because I had had enough of this. I've been dealing with neck issues, and there was nothing worse than that for
Yeah.
me. And I remember my mom asking me after the game, in the kind of friends and family section of the stadium, she was like, what about next week? And I was like, Mom, there's not going to be a next week,
Wow.
And so I was off the operating table and in class less than a year later, right? So, and I got to law school and I felt like I was a not normal person. I was, I had to readjust to like what we kind of like civilian life almost. And I got really interested in civil rights law, and I felt like there was a line in a Supreme Court case that spoke to me in particular about voting rights, that it said that the right to vote was preservative of all of the rights, right? That all of your rights are derived from your right to vote. That if you can vote, you can protect yourself. You can form coalitions. You can vote for candidates if you're choosing, and that's why it was so powerful. That's why there was such a big fight to restrict it for people like us. And what was happening in Texas, as you know, was that they were making it harder for folks to vote. And I thought that was wrong. And so I wanted to be a voting rights lawyer, and I had a chance, as you mentioned, to go to DOJ, but also while I was in law school, I was at the White House counsel's office. And then I was asked to go to HUD, the Department of Housing and Urban Development, to work in their general counsel's office there at the end of the administration. And I closed it out. And during the transition to the Trump administration, I thought, these people don't know what they're doing. Like, they didn't take it seriously. They took 2 weeks to even come to HUD. And as you know, usually after a presidential election, the next day, the landing team arrives.
That's exactly right.
And they start the transition because they've got, 2 months to run the biggest government in the world, And they didn't show up. And then I was preparing these memos for them for the transition, and I was like, they're not going to read this stuff. And I just thought, this is going to be really, really tough on the country. And my wife and I were already going to move home to Dallas, and there was this congressional district where I was born and raised, and where my family lived, and that was my home. That it just so happened that there was this guy there who had been there for 22 years, and nobody thought he could be beaten. He was unopposed in 2016. He had no opponent on the ballot.
Wow.
Right? Because everybody thought he was unbeatable. 2 years later in 2018, I'm like, yeah, I think I can beat him. Right? So we built a campaign that was really grassroots, and that was focused on people, but also it wasn't particularly ideological or just based on being a Democrat. It was about who we were as Texans, as North Texans in this community. I had a story to tell about who we were because I could go to my high school in the district, I could go to my YMCA in the district, I could go to the places that had made a difference in my life, and just tell people, hey, listen, these investments that we made are why I was able to do these things, and we should make them for other people too. And stories like mine shouldn't be unique. And so, we beat this guy by nearly, I think it was 6 points, or 6.5 or 7. I can't remember exactly what it was. And so that was how I, got into Congress. And I was pretty naive about it. I'd never run for office. I wasn't really somebody who had much political experience. I had done voting rights in Texas, and I'd done voting rights around campaigns, but I'd never been on the political side. And so I had a lot to learn. But I just applied my same kind of football principles and learned what my job was and tried to execute it. So.
When you think back to your time in Congress, what was the work that you're most proud of?
Well, there's several things, but the biggest thing was that I was on the Veterans Affairs Committee. In fact, Jaime, Whip Clyburn basically put me on that committee. He was like, he's like, we need you on this committee. I was like, yes, sir, I'm going on the committee.
That's usually how it happens with him.
yeah, exactly. Yeah, he was like, we need you. And I was like, here I am, So I got on the Veterans Affairs Committee. And I wanted to be on there because football players and veterans have some similarities in terms of, the experience of being a part of an intense group experience, and then when you leave that, kind of feeling like you've been kind of unplugged. Of course, we're not risking our lives. I don't want to indicate that we are, but there's some overlap in terms of the feeling of having to rediscover yourself. And there was in Dallas, we had the South Dallas VA is the second busiest VA in the country. We have the second most veterans in the country. In Texas, we have the most women veterans. We have we're going to soon become the number one state for veterans. A lot of Texans have served, and a lot of people who have served live in Texas. And so our Dallas VA was the second busiest in the country, and it was just overwhelmed. And there was a hospital that had closed down in my district that was a good hospital. It was in good condition, but the business model just didn't work until they closed it down. And it was kind of an eyesore. A lot of jobs were lost. And of course, the community lost a hospital. I decided that I wanted to get this hospital donated to the VA. And this had never happened before, though. And as you know, government is just not good at doing things that have never happened.
That's exactly right.
If there's not a manual for it, they just say no. Their first inclination is no. And this was working with the Trump administration. As a freshman member of Congress, but I thought that this was something that we could really get done. And the hospital network, Baylor Scott and White, the city of Garland, the Trump administration VA, and even some of the tenants at that hospital, we had to kind of wrangle all of these different groups and get them together. And I remember one night, the number 2 guy at the VA called me right before I was going to bed, and he was like, we're pulling out of the deal. And I told him, hey, just everybody just pause for 24 hours. Let me figure this out. And we did get it sorted out. And so ultimately, even though they tried hard not to take this hospital,
Yeah.
I mean, they put out several reports saying they weren't going to do it. We got this donated at the value of $400 million. It would probably cost a couple $1 billion
Wow.
in 10 years for us to build a similar hospital. It opened just before COVID hit, and it's serving our veterans right now. It's created 5,000 jobs. The community is planning to build around it because now they can bring back the businesses that were serving the hospital, like the restaurants and the things that people go to when they're on their off time. And it's a really, it's one of the singular things that I done. It wasn't legislation. It wasn't voting on something. It was just having an idea and the convening power, being a member that allowed me to see it across the line. And I think about that a lot because it's not partisan. It's not it's not Democrats or Republicans going to the hospital. I did it with the Republican administration, but they really didn't care either about the partisanship of it. And it reminds me that we can do big things in government sometimes.
Well, and that's real leadership, man, because ultimately people send you to Washington, D.C. not to give big speeches, not to send pithy, tweets or whatever, but it's just to get shit done. And
That's right.
when you think back on it, think of, the ramifications of you doing that. Like all of the veterans that are positively impacted, and not only the veterans, but the military families and the families that they have
Mm-hmm.
who support them, and now the
Yep.
jobs that you have created. So it's a ripple effect across the community that isn't just for that one particular year, but for years to come. That's amazing, Colin. It really is amazing, and it's real. It really is the reason why your class, along with Lauren Underwood's in your class too, right?
Mm-hmm.
I
That's
mean,
right.
you had the superstar class of folks who weren't all about standing in front of the camera, but just getting stuff done, and it really is amazing. And I know you must feel great about it, man.
Yeah, it's going to be there for
Yeah,
decades, and it's going to keep serving folks, and I'm proud of that. And I've had a lot of veterans come up to me and thank me for that. And you're right. I think the class of 2018, I kind of called us like we're like small d Democratic
yeah.
antibodies. Like the host was under attack, and we were generated, to respond. And whether it's Lauren or Alyssa Slotkin or Abigail Spanberger or Mikey Sherrill or Andy Kim, and you can kind of keep going. You know, AOC was in that class,
Yeah.
right? Like we, a lot of just people who, Ilhan, like we were all in that same class. Most of the first people I named, though, we'd never run for office, right? And we weren't politicians. And we ran in these Republican districts. Sharice David's my good friend, Lizzie Fletcher in Houston. Like we ran in these red districts, and we flipped those seats, and then we had to hold on to them, which, as you know,
It
is
is
hard.
very
And
difficult.
because the first thing you get when you win a seat like that is that you become the top target in the next election, you know. And so we had this kind of intense experience, I think, of the downsides of politics as well. But I think we, at least for me, I have always kept that kind of initial drive. And I when I meet people in politics, I try and, especially young people, and you know this, Jamie, you've heard me say this to young people, like whatever it was that kind of first thing that got you off the sidelines, like don't lose
That's
that,
exactly right.
right? You know what I mean? Because it's easy to get jaded
Yep.
in this, and it's easy to lose sight of that, right? But if you can protect that little part, then you'll be fine.
Well, and I hope, man, in this election cycle that we get even more young people to step up to run because
Yeah.
we desperately need them right now. And I'm proud of what you all have accomplished in Texas. I think this first time in recent history, you have a Democrat that had filed for every single race in the
Mm-hmm.
state
That's right.
house, Congress, up and down the ballot. That's just amazing. It really is amazing as a testament. And I
Yeah.
think Texas is going to surprise a lot of people this November. I really do. I really do.
I do too. This state senate race that we had here in Fort Worth, where I think it was like a Trump plus
Yeah.
17 district or something. And, and I know the guy who won, Taylor, he is a union leader, and he had supported me with his union, and he talked to me about running for office, and I was like, you should definitely do it. And I'm not saying I'm why he ran or won. I'm just saying that it was incredible. And I think you're right to say that, we've had elections where we've had whole regions of the state where we weren't
Yeah.
competing, and I think it's great. I also think that unfortunately Texas is ground zero for much of this administration's, just bullshit that they're
Yeah.
doing. I mean, from the tariffs to the ICE, terrorizing communities, to a lot of the detention centers are here. Obviously we are a border state as well, so we have those components. And then we have a state government that is completely lockstep with this administration. If anything, they want to go even farther, right? And so we're feeling, how the impact of this as much as anyone.
Well, and I know how much you love your state of Texas, and how much you love Dallas, your home. It's similar to the love that I have for South Carolina. And another commonality is that though we have our state government, and some of the folks that we send to Washington D.C. are cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs. I mean, they're
Right.
batshit crazy, and I know that was part of the motivation of you running for the U.S. Senate in 2024, and then thinking about running for the Senate again for 2026. Help us step into your thoughts about why you decided to run for 2024 Senate against Ted Cruz, and then what you learned from that experience, and why you thought, you know what, I might try to do this one more time.
Well, with Ted Cruz, I felt personally insulted as a Texan by his presence and by his callousness and cowardice as our senator. I think I used to say this often, but when I was in football, we used to have certain guys you'd call a me guy. And like the me guys were always about themselves, and they were the ones who were trying to get all the attention. And if a team had too many me guys, that team wasn't going anywhere, no matter how talented they were, right? And he was kind of, to me, the ultimate me guy, and he had abandoned us, of course, during the freeze, and I found that to be offensive. But also, I was there on January 6th, as you know, and I was somebody who I thought I was going to have to hold a door and defend my colleagues because I was, the only former NFL linebacker on the House floor when the mob was almost breaking in. And my wife was pregnant, and I didn't know that I was going to make it out that day. And he was somebody who had been going around the country lying about the election, even though he knew
Yep.
better, still is, of course. And who then, when the mob came, he was hiding from them, even though he had summoned them. And so, I knew it was going to be a tough election, and I knew that it was a long shot. But I felt like we could, also respond to the moment of what was happening in Texas in terms of, losing reproductive rights and, women and families being forced into these horrible positions by this ban we had here. And so, I wanted to try and, speak to that and, bring folks together. And we ended up, as you know, Jamie, we, came up short, but we ended up outrunning the presidential ticket by nearly 6 points, by the most votes of any Senate race in the country. Some of the parts of the state that we had the biggest troubles in as a party, I had ran the farthest ahead, like along the border. I ran 10 points ahead, of the ticket. But there's only so far that kind of rubber band can stretch. And if we'd had a better year, then I think we probably would have been successful, right? And after the election, I took a few months to be with my family and to kind of become normal again. Just to be quite honest with you, as you know, how coming off of a campaign,
it's a lot.
It's a lot. And I felt like if I was gonna do it again, it would be like when I went back to the NFL, where I wouldn't do it the same way. That I would have, the humility, but also the strategic understanding that we can't do it the same way. And I wanted to try and go to working people, because what really bothered me was seeing how many working folks had voted for Donald Trump on the promise that he was going to make life more affordable for them, that they're going to be able to get ahead. I understood that. I know you probably understand that, Jamie, because like if you're sitting there struggling, you think, well, maybe he will, maybe he means it, that my life is going to get better. But the problem was he was always intending to lie to them, and he always meant to do what they were going to do, which is stick it to working people to help the rich. And so I wanted to go to folks and say, okay, how can I, instead of asking you to come to my political event, how can I go to you, at your job, at your kid's high school football game, at the place where you are gathered and you're feeling relaxed and have these honest conversations. And you know, as you know, and as you mentioned, I've, of course, have switched to this congressional race, but I'm really thankful for that opportunity to go all around the state and speak to working people, because it also gave me a lot of insight into how people see the Democratic Party. And I think, we have some real issues in the party that we have to start cleaning up as well. We can't just make it all about being against Trump, right? And say that, we're just here to be a opposition to Trump. That's not good enough, and that's not what working people are looking for. They expect us also to I think, clean up our act, to clean up the corruption that's in our party as well, the overwhelming influence of big money, the stock trading we see members of Congress doing, the idea that, as you said, we can't get young people involved, and that we, sometimes have, are not refreshing our ranks, right, and giving new hope and new ideas to the party. There's a lot that we need to do, and also to not be so tied up with what's going on, in like the elite circles, of the New York
Yeah.
Times and the podcasts, elite circles, right? Like working folks don't care about that, right? And their experience is different from what the macroeconomics is saying, right? You can't tell them the economy is the best in the world. It might be in terms of the macroeconomics, but it isn't for them, right? And so I really enjoyed that experience. And of course, we can talk about it, my decision to switch, but it gave me a chance to touch grass and to go back to my roots. I went to a lot of high school football
I know.
games. There's a lot of kids.
You hit the bar scene. You went to the barber shops. I was really energized, Colin, by seeing you out and just connecting with real people about the issues that were important to them. And I think that's so important. And I would say this to any, particularly folks running for the first time this cycle. It's important that you are having those conversations. It's important that you're making those connections. And I really saw a difference between you and you did much more of that this time around than you did back in 2024. And I think to be part, you and I have both been in this situation where we're running statewide for the first time. And, you got consultants and everybody else in your ear about here are the things you need to do. The DS is telling you, well, you need to do this and do that. I felt like this time around, you were just doing what you felt Colin needed to do. Like it was, yes, all that advice is great. It's great to get that feedback, but after the experience of 2024, this was more of your race rather than a race that somebody else wanted you to run.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, I felt like myself much more relaxed. Also, I didn't feel like I could not in the first race, and I think a lot of particularly young, people of color will feel this way. I felt like I couldn't make any mistakes.
Yep.
And I was so careful, and I was a little bit too careful, right? And that's something that comes with that territory of constantly feeling like you got to be twice as good. And I felt this time, what's the worst thing that could happen, right? I've already been through that, and so I felt much more relaxed. And going to these places where construction sites, the bars, the barbershops, the football games. I also just wanted to talk to people who, we had lost, right? And who, but those are people that I came from. And I feel like if I can't get back with these people, then, I need to get out of this business,
exactly.
of trying to lead people, and so I really enjoyed that. And I think that it also gave me a perspective on fundraising and stuff like that is important. And when you run in states like we did, it's so expensive, and so the advice you get is to make sure you just raise as much money as you possibly can. Just raise money. But you're also spending all your time around people who have disposable income, right? And you're having conversations with them about things that are of interest to them, obviously, right? And I felt like I was talking to people about, wealthy people about what working people were going through instead of talking to working people, and that's what I wanted to do more of. And so that experience is one that I now in any race I ever run, but also just like you said, talking to any candidate, I would say, listen, it's important to raise a lot of money, and I get that you got to hit some certain things, but all the money in the world is not going to give you that perspective or that ability to speak to folks. You got to get out there and remember, why you got in this in the first place.
You have now decided that you are going to run for Congress, not the seat that you were in originally, because Republicans in Texas, we all know, went in and tinkered along with seats. So you're running for Texas, the 33rd congressional district, which is this is not a district currently occupied by a Democrat. Am I correct?
Well, I guess the number of the district is, but yeah, it's a new district. So
Yeah.
this is Mark Vesey's in the
Mark,
33rd
yeah, exactly.
now, but it's yeah.
So is Mark Vesey's district. Mark is not running in this district, has decided not to run next Congress. So in that sense, it's an open seat. And that's the point that I wanted to bring up. And so, but you are running against Julie Johnson, who is a congresswoman who succeeded you once you left Congress in your congressional district. Tell me about this district that was this now created a different district. What are the people like? What are the issues that are driving the conversations? And tell me about what your thrust is running for this congressional district.
So my old district, the 32nd district, the Republicans took that out to East Texas. It's now a Republican district, and it doesn't exist anymore in terms of being winnable for a Democrat, at least in the near future. And so this is a newly drawn district that kind of goes from East to West Dallas and is really entirely contained within Dallas County. And it's really going to be the main Dallas congressional district now. And they moved Jasmine's district, the 30th district, a little further south. And obviously she's running now for Senate. And then Mark Vesey, as you mentioned, decided not to run. And so this is a heavily majority-minority district. It's a working-class district. It actually contains the neighborhood where my mom and I spent our first 7 years of my life, where she was really, really struggling, and where she was a teacher until she started renting a house a little bit further north to try and put me into quote-unquote better schools.
Yep.
And it's a lot of the communities that I grew up in, that I played sports in. I know it very well. I know the development of all of these areas. But I think it's one of those districts that's going to need a really active member of Congress. And it's going to need a very strong voice, but then also somebody who can really deliver on the constituent services, which, as you know, Jamie, a lot of what we do is not just voting on something. It's that we're the last resort for many families, right? Like they got a problem with the IRS. They've tried everything, and then somebody tells them, you should give your congressperson a call, and they think, oh well, I'll call them, but it's not going to help. And then we are able to help, and it makes a huge difference for them. Or their veterans benefits have been held up, or their Social Security check has been held up, and if those checks don't come on time, they might have a ripple effect where everything starts to fall apart. And they call us at the last second, and we're able to help. And that's something I always really prided myself on, in Congress, was that we took that stuff very seriously, and we worked very hard at it. And I think this is going to be a district that needs to have somebody who will focus on, that affordability that we talked about, but also just what does it mean to get into and stay in the middle class? And I really, the kind of pathways into that and the pillars that made that possible for me and my family have just been destroyed in Texas and across the country. And I think it's access to health care. We have the highest uninsured rate in the country. Dallas County has over a 20% uninsured rate. It's outrageous, right? It's education. They dismantled the Department of Education. Okay, well, who does that serve? I mean, it's like things like Head Start, right? Kids with special needs. It's helping us train our next generation of teachers. Those are all important to a district like this, right? It's housing. And, like I talk about my mom's story, one of the plans that I put forward is to help first-time home buyers with their down payment, because that was my mom's story. She could afford to pay it for a house. She just could not get $50,000 at any single time for a down payment. That was not attainable for her, and if we could help her get over that hurdle, or a person like her, then they can be on the pathway to building wealth as opposed to just renting, right? And so it's all these things, but I think it's a district ultimately where we have less representation, particularly for minorities in Texas. Every district they targeted in the 5 districts that they wanted to create was a majority minority district, right? And they folded Barbara Jordan's district in Houston to another district. They folded this district in with another one in Dallas. In the Austin area, they got rid of a district, and we're going to try and make sure that they don't win a couple of the other ones in South Texas that they thought they could win. But it's all targeting, communities of color, taking away our ability to have representation in Congress. And so I think it's really important that we have actual representation, but also, a strong voice.
No, I think it's really important, and particularly given that, there are more Black folks in the state of Texas than any other state in the union. I think Texas deserves. We need some Black men in Congress, and we need some from Texas as well. So I'm glad you're doing this. I just spoke recently with Tiffany Muller of End Citizens United, and I know this is something that you're highlighting in your campaign is your refusal to take corporate PAC money, but you're also talking about ending congressional stock trading. Talk a little bit about that and why that's so important in this race.
Yeah, I've never taken PAC money or corporate PAC money in my time. And listen, I don't judge people who do. I felt like it was something a commitment that I could make so that folks wouldn't think that I was bought and paid for, but also that they could at least say, well, any decision he makes, it's not because I'm getting a check from these folks. Dallas is a very heavy corporate city.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah.
Like we have some of the biggest corporations in the country here. And I did not want to feel like I was, captured by them. I want to help grow jobs and grow the economy, but we're going to work together. I'm not going to work for you, right? And I wanted to establish that from the jump. And on the stock trading, listen, I never traded stocks in 6 years in Congress, even though it was legal for me to do so. I did not think that it was ethical. Mm-hmm. Because I felt like I had access to insider information. I did have access to insider information, just to be very clear. People came to my office and briefed me on what they were doing. When they left, I could have easily made a purchase on the basis of that, right? Or we had classified briefings, or I was voting on budgets where I knew where certain money was going to be directed. And I just did not think that was right, and I'm not running for Congress to get rich. I think it's a public service. But also when I was going around the state in this most recent election, and I would talk about the corruption of the Trump administration, folks would agree with me. Even people who voted for Trump, they would agree with me that he's corrupt. They see the plane, they see the ballroom, they see all this stuff, and they think he is corrupt, okay? But they also say, well, what about the stock trading in Congress? And all you can say to them is, you're absolutely right. That's wrong too, right? And I think we don't really sometimes always realize how much that's undercutting some of our best arguments against the corruption of this administration. Is people say, well, what about what's going on in the Congress? I mean, isn't it wrong what they're doing? And it's like, yes, that's wrong too, right? And so I started to feel much more convicted about it, because when I had working people, raise that to me, just kind of casually being like, yeah, but they're all corrupt, right? I mean, they're trading stocks and he's out there taking this. They're all corrupt. And it's like, no, no, not everybody.
Not everybody. That's exactly right.
Yeah. That's eating away at the heart of this whole project, So that's why I got really convicted about it.
Yeah. Well, and, it seems, Colin, that your race from this congressional race from day one, the other side started to get a little negative. And what's your thought on that? How are you going to counter, or what's your positioning in terms of how you're going to run this race and how you feel that you're going to ultimately win?
Yeah. I think, obviously, coming off a Senate race where you're not successful, some folks might think that now it's time to pop off at you. And I'm like, wait a second, no, I'm still that the one you don't want to mess with.
I'm a nice guy, but don't let it fool you.
I like, from the hip hop, I'm a killer. I'm not a killer, but don't push me, right? So listen, what I gotta feel like is, okay, well, let's just put it out there, right? Let's just You want to have you want to talk about me? Let's have an actual comparison. Don't compare me to the Almighty. Compare me to the alternative,
Yeah.
as Joe would say, right? And in this case, Julie Johnson has decided to be one of the most active stock traders in the entire Congress. Unfortunately, she's also been trading on things that she's directly legislating on. She bought stock in Palantir a week after she got into Congress, knowing that Palantir was going to be a huge part of this ICE push, of the DHS contracting, and she sold it months later at 150% profit, right? And that's just one example, of her stock trading. And I find that to be outrageous. Listen, I don't, sometimes people say, well, don't tell me what you value. Show me what you spend your money on. I'll tell you what you value, right? Don't tell me what you stand for. Show me what you're doing and I'll tell you what you stand for. And apparently you think it's okay to profit off of what these folks are doing. And that's not the only example of that, but just trading at all to me in this time when people are really struggling, when everybody around the country and in this district in particular are saying, listen, I feel like I can't get ahead and I'm doing everything right. And you're, instead of spending your time laser focused on that, you're also trying to make yourself, wealthier. I think that's disqualifying in my opinion. And that's, yes, knowing that it's legal right now and knowing that we need to make it illegal, I still think you shouldn't be doing that, right? So I'm just willing to say, what I think I need to say. And as we talked about earlier, I'm a lot more relaxed than I ever have been running for office. I'm dangerous right now because I don't really have anything to hold back. So
Unfiltered. Yeah, I sort of feel the same way as a former DNC chair. I don't have the White House over my shoulder saying, oh, you can't say
That's
that,
right.
you can't say it. I'm just going to be honest and I'm going to be real. This is how I feel about things, and it may hurt some feelings. It may be unwelcome by some, but the truth is the truth, and sometimes you just got to put it out there. Straight, no chaser.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
I mean, okay.
Well, now looking at the Senate race in Texas, there's a lot going on there too, man.
Yeah.
Particularly, I don't know. When you stepped off the stage, it seems like all the civility left.
Yeah.
It
Yeah.
has gotten it is contentious, and you see it online, and you see the back and forth. And I just recently interviewed Jasmine a few weeks ago for the race, and one of the things that bothered me, and I saw it when you were running, I am seeing it even more now with her running, is this trying to use this term electability as a hammer against, particularly, I think, candidates of color running statewide.
Yeah, that's right.
What are your thoughts as someone who's observing this race that you were once in? Unfold. What are some of the thoughts that you have now? And I do want to bring this up. Just recently, I saw some TikTok. It was I guess a content creator in Texas posted a TikTok, and in that she made an accusation that Representative Talarico recently referred to you as a mediocre black man.
Mm-hmm.
What are your thoughts again on this Texas Senate race? And I don't even know if you want to address the alleged accusation about you.
Yeah. Well, we'll get to that one because
Okay.
I do think he said that, and I do think that I want to say something about it. But I also think that even before that, as you said, I was incredibly angered by the coverage of Jasmine. Whether or not she's your cup of tea or not, she's proven to be a formidable politician in her own right. She has an appeal to people who we have a hard time connecting with as a party. And everywhere I would go, people would say, man, I'm so glad to see you. I really appreciate you. And they'd be like, you know what? And I really like that Jasmine.
You hear that quite often, actually.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'd be like, oh, yeah. And they'd be like, yeah, I saw she was up there fighting. That's what, and listen. So, and my whole point is she seems to set the teeth on edge of certain commentators out there. And that might be the point, right? Like that might be the point. We are a heavily majority minority state. Our pathway to victory runs through communities of color, working people, and yes, also crossover voters. But many of our crossover voters are also people of color in
Yes,
Texas.
that's exactly right.
Right? Right? So like what we're doing here is we are trying to win among people who in many cases have decided, and it is a decision, that they're not going to be involved in the process because nothing's going to change for them. And I often see us running against not just the Republicans in Texas, but against the well-earned cynicism that things won't get better, right? And the sense of despair almost that is set in certain parts of our communities where people feel like, man, I'm struggling as it is. I don't have the time to jump through all those hoops to go vote, and if what's going to change for me? And I think, we'll see, but I think Jasmine has the potential to speak to many folks who feel that way. And I think that's powerful. And that might not be what the New York Times columnists are looking for, but it might be something that's valuable, and it's certainly something that shouldn't be dismissed.
Colin, I think what is intriguing, Jasmine's approach to this is an intriguing one that I have not seen play out, particularly in the South in a while, in that, yes, we can appeal and try to get some crossover, but what I'm really going to spend a lot of my time and energy on is that disaffected part of our community that if we got them energized, if we got them focused and they turn out, I know they're going to vote for us, but
Yes.
but they're not. And the question is, what will you spend more energy on? Like we've seen people try to do, just the appealing to Dr. King told us about the moderates, right? Just to the moderates, and listen, I consider myself a moderate in many ways, but we've seen that appeal particularly to moderate Republicans and trying to get them to come out and the like. And maybe it works every now and then. Maybe you can get the stars aligned, but it doesn't always work. But we have seen very little attempts at really igniting a fuel underneath some of these folks who have just, as you mentioned, just are sort of disaffected folks in minority communities who like, pox on all your houses. I don't want to participate in this. I just think it's an interesting concept that in a state like Texas, in a state like South Carolina, well, maybe we should try. And it might be the answer to why we are where we are.
Yeah. I mean, listen, and I'm not saying that it's the only way.
No.
I'm just saying that to your point, don't say that one is electable and one's not. Right? You know what I mean? Like, you might not get it, but don't disrespect.
Don't disrespect. Don't disrespect.
And don't come to Black people. And you and I've talked about this before. Don't come to us every election cycle for our votes.
Yes.
And then be disrespectful of us as candidates, qualified candidates. When we run for office, right? Yeah. Like, we check every box, do everything right, and then, they're not electable.
Well, and that's the thing. I mean, you were, a civil rights lawyer, NFL player, former congressman, right? Jasmine, an attorney, congresswoman, right? In what world are these folks with those type of resumes not qualified in order to run statewide?
Right. And what are you saying to young Black people out there, young people of minorities? What are you saying to them about their potential to be in elected office someday? Right.
Basically, Colin, you can only fill certain roles. There's some roles that are above you. You can't.
That's right.
It's too big for you to handle.
And just going back to the TikTok comment, listen, I kind of laughed, of course. You know how, Jamie, like, we're always feeling like, okay, we got to jump twice as high, got to run twice as fast. We got, but I just laugh because, I don't have to defend what I've done in my life to say I'm not, mediocre. I do think that there's often, a bit of confession when you make an accusation.
Yeah. Yeah.
Like, so, you know. But the other thing, I was talking with some of my friends about it last night because they saw it and they texted me, a couple of my, black friends from the Obama administration. It was like, listen, if you want to compliment a black woman, just do that.
But you don't have to,
Okay.
you don't have to denigrate anybody.
Don't put down a black man at the same time. Right. Yeah. Like we're tired of this kind of like veiled criticism of black men.
Yeah.
Veiling it in a compliment or appeal to black women. No, don't do that. Right. And so I find the understanding of what we need in Texas to sometimes be so rooted in places that are not like Texas, right? And South Carolina is a great example as well. We just have, like you said, we have a voting problem. We have massive parts of our state where we have huge underperformance in voting. In the last election, I outran, the ticket in every part of our state, but we had a big drop off in turnout in Dallas and Houston. And if we did not have that drop off in turnout, then I likely would have won. And so we need to look at us ourselves as a party and say, well, why are we seeing this in our urban centers? What is it about the appeal that apparently isn't reaching? And if as a party we're just checking that box in October of the election year, that's not good enough. And we've talked about taking black voters for granted. You and I have a lot. But this is serious.
It is
now, right? I have black friends, men who have voted for Donald Trump, right? Like we know that we are we're in a situation where a persuadable voter might not be the persuadable voter you thought it was.
That's exactly right. And there's some persuasion that has to happen within the black community. Again, those days of just the monolithic vote, and those days are over, and particularly with these younger generation of voters coming up. I mean, it is they are not just voting Democratic because their mama and their grandmas and their grandfathers voted Democratic. You have to make the case. You have to persuade them. And it's not that they will always go vote Republican. They just may not vote at all. And so
that's right.
You have to persuade them to act. But going back to the comment, do you actually? I mean, I don't know James. I've never never met him. I've heard of him. I've seen him, but I've never met him. Do you actually think he said it?
I think that this woman has no reason to make it up, and I think that from what I've seen, she immediately told people about it. She immediately was texting other people about it. It doesn't seem like the kind of thing that she wouldn't say, and
apparently she was supporting him initially, right? When
right, and she was a supporter of his, right? So there's no like motive, But also, he said some things to me that I don't like, and he said to me before he got into the race that he thought that he would be a better candidate because he doesn't have a family, and that so he doesn't have as much time. He can spend more time campaigning, and I'm. As you know me, Jamie, like I didn't know my dad, so I'm like all about being a father to my two boys, right? And I was like, no, I run because of my family.
That's extra motivation, actually.
Exactly, right. That I'm not. This is not just ambition.
No.
You know what I mean? Like, and I have a connection that makes me want to do this, and so I just think that it's the kind of thing that could be said, and I also think that. I've just seen a lack of understanding of how to talk to the black community in particular that I think is a real problem.
I'm starting to see an underbelly of our party that I just don't like. And I'm going to call it out. And it seems like there are folks who are becoming even more emboldened within the party to say things that are disrespectful, that are derogatory to communities of color, and more specifically to the black community. And I think it's just important that for folks to understand that, when democracy has been on the line, that the black community as a monolith, time and time again, has stood up and been one of the first to stand up to save this country.
That's right.
But what we won't tolerate is the disrespect. We work too damn hard to get to where we are, but also to protect this nation and to protect it from itself many times.
Yes.
To allow the disrespect, and particularly from folks in a party that will, if black folks stepped away from the Democratic Party, then there is no longer a Democratic Party.
No, I think you're right, Jamie. I think there's something that happens after elections are unsuccessful where, people start casting about and being like, well, maybe this is what we should be. Maybe this is what we should be, And I see this kind of casting about, and I agree with you. I just want to put it to a stop.
Yeah.
Right? Like, okay, we need to figure out what we need to be doing. But when we talk about working class people, let's be very clear. It's mostly black and brown people,
Yeah.
That we're talking about, right? And who are our hourly workers? Who are the folks who had the hardest time during COVID, who coming out of COVID, who were essential workers, their kids were at home, they were struggling, had the highest mortality rates, come out of it, things are more expensive, they're frustrated. This is what we need to be talking to, right? And I agree with you. We got to put a sock in it.
Well, given that, we give out a special award on this show called the Sit Your Ass Down Award.
Mm-hmm.
And Colin Allred, this is your opportunity. If there's an individual, there's a group of people, if it's just a concept or a notion, but who would you present this week's Sit Your Ass Down Award to?
All right, I'm ready for this. I want to tell all these columnists, all these elite party thinkers to sit your ass down when it comes to what would work in Texas. Okay, like, you don't know Texas, you're not from here, and your theories are based on other states and also what you like.
Yes,
not what people like in Texas. It's totally separate things, right? And also not an understanding of what our pathway to victory in Texas is, the communities that it runs through, and who we have to persuade, right? So sit your ass down with your column, opining from New York City about who's the best Senate candidate in a Texas race. You don't even have to weigh in.
Just stay out of it.
Sit your ass down. Just stay out of it. You don't know, so stay out of it.
And Colin, from a bunch of folks who probably never been on a campaign, never run for anything themselves, but yet they are now the experts on what happens in Texas. It's amazing.
Yeah, or if you're in San Francisco and you got a podcast, sit your ass down, okay?
I love it, man. I love it. Well, listen, Colin, man, it has been so much fun to be on the show with you, to have you at our table. Man, I want folks to know I am all in for Colin Allred. So, Colin, whatever I can do, brother, to help you win this race, to get back to Congress, because we need you there. We need your voice. We need your honesty, but most importantly, we need your leadership. So whatever I can do, I'm all in for you, my friend. And again, just so proud of you and so happy to have you at our table.
Thank you, Jamie. I appreciate you for being the leader that you are, brother. I appreciate you for having me on. And let's go win.
Let's win it. If you enjoyed today's show, please be sure to like, subscribe, and share. Follow us on Apple Podcasts, YouTube, Spotify, or anywhere you find your podcasts. To be the first to know who will be at our table next, be sure to subscribe to our Substack on jamieharrison.substack.com. At Our Table with Jamie Harrison is a production of Vision Blue Media. Our founding executive producers are Jason Hyder and Jamie Harrison. Our producer is Kyle Kelly. Our content consultants are Ernie Grigg and Clay Middleton. Our digital communications are led by Lauren Brown. Inez Smolansky provides production legal. Title sequence by Tom Hunt. Our theme song, Blonde Gone, is written by Dewey and published by Alibi Music Library. Very special thanks to Colin Allred and his team. I'm Jamie Harrison, and I look forward to another conversation at our table.